I'm from the East End of Glasgow, had a dream to go into business.
How did his colleague, Baroness Mone, end up with nearly £30 million of taxpayers' money in her bank account?
Because she wouldn't tell me the truth about anything.
I made an error in what I said to the press.
Nobody can handle that woman.
Michelle is an utterly broken woman.
Left school at 15, I'm from the East End of Glasgow, had a dream to go into business. That was always been my dream since I was a wee girl. Started up MGM International 13 years ago, developed Ultimo for 3 years, which is now 10 years old. It's now the biggest lingerie brand in the country.
Now, Misha Mone has repeatedly claimed over the years that when she grew up in a one-bedroom flat in this area, that it didn't have a shower or a bath. So she had to come here to White Vale Baths, it's now closed in the early 80s, to get washed, to get ready for school. But when the family moved to this new build here, council house new build here in Claythorne Avenue in the Carlton district of Glasgow, she most certainly would have had a bath and a shower, perhaps even both.
I believe, in fact I'm pretty certain that when her dad got his injury, whatever it was, he then ended up in a custom built bungalow in the Carlton. And there may have been some of them had outside toilets, probably a lot of them didn't have bathrooms, but they were not slums. And obviously the bungalow that the father then got was lovely. Now I think it might have been a council bungalow, but to go on about rags to riches, and again, I mean, I was probably as guilty when I was a journalist. It's an easy shorthand to use when you're taking somebody from a working class background, you know, who's now living it up in the Ritz in London and all the rest of it. But to perpetuate that myth is rubbish.
She left school with no qualifications to pursue a modelling career. Mone obtained a marketing job with Labatt's Brewing Company and within just 2 years had risen to become its head of marketing in Scotland, but has since admitted she invented qualifications to help get the job. She was aged just 23 when she was made redundant by the company, but that prompted her to set up her own business using her redundancy compensation. And it was from this house that a 19-year-old Michelle, as a bride-to-be, would leave to go and get married at the Albany Hotel to Michael Mone. And the Albany was where she actually worked as a ring girl, holding up the numbers in between the rounds at the St Andrews Boxing Club. But together, Michael and Michelle had a knockout plan to grab a slice of the multi-billion-pound lingerie business. In 1996, the couple founded MGM International. 3 years later, she launched the Ultimo lingerie brand at Selfridges in London, thrusting her into the media spotlight in spectacular style.
Pull with gel, it's gel cups. It doesn't fall out, it's sewn in the cups. When you pull the breast inwards and upwards, the gel sinks to the side and underneath the breast where you need it, forms a second skin, doubles your cleavage.
I got a phone call from a lad called Michael Mone that introduced himself. Could he come and see me at my Glasgow offices? So he came along and he showed me the business plan. And of course, every business plan looks good. You never get a bad business plan. But it was a well done business plan, which he had done. And he explained that his wife had developed this new kind of bra. And I've got as much interest in bras as any other man, so I was quite happy to look at the pictures. And he said, we're looking for some money to get the thing rolling. Now, as luck would have it, Tom Hunter had just sold his sports firm and trousered about 300 million or thereabouts, and I was doing work for Tom. So it was kind of natural. I mean, I knew Tom would be looking for things to do with his money. So I brought them together, and Tom's wife, as history tells us, tried the bra on in their house upstairs, thought it was very good, and Tom agreed to back her. So that was that. Tom said to Michelle, I think it would be a good idea to get Jack, as Jack knows who you are, he clearly knows who I am, I think it would be a good idea if you brought in Jack to do your PR, because you've got to get some visibility, and she'd no visibility then. So we started off, and within a couple of months I just couldn't work with her, because she wouldn't tell me the truth about anything. Well, I get a phone call from a newspaper, I think it was probably The Sun, and they said, oh, Jack, you're acting for Ultimo. That's right. What do you think about this documentary that's going out tomorrow? And I said, what documentary? And they said, oh, we've had a crew, the BBC have had a crew following her about in Australia because she's launching her Australian business. I said, I don't know anything about this. I said, and what's it going to be like? And the guy said, horrendous. He said, because when she got to Australia, the young boy that she had put in as her manager failed to get all the samples delivered. So she'd called the press, as she does, called the All Australian press to be there. And there were no samples. And she had a meltdown in front of the cameras, you know, bawling this young boy out. So I phoned Michelle and I said, when were you going to tell me about this documentary? Oh, I told you about it. I said, no, you didn't. I said, you know you're going to get murdered in it. Well, it was pretty bad, but you know, I'm sure I told you. I said, if you told me, I could have done something about it. That's what I do. And she said, oh, well, there you go. And I phoned her husband and he said, oh, Jack, this is just typical. I mean, even then, he was finding her a handful.
But something else Michelle doesn't appear to have been upfront about was the story which the whole of Ultimo was built on, that they had supplied the bra worn by Julia Roberts in the Oscar-winning movie Erin Brockovich.
When she first launched Ultimo, she said it was the bra worn by Julia Roberts in the Erin Brockovich film, which some of us will remember, the lawyer Erin Brockovich. You know, like Michelle, comes from working class background, girl does good story. You know, to be associated with a film like that is a really big deal. So Michelle says that Julia wore the bra, and it turns out that this probably wasn't the case, because in a few years later, the film's costume designer, a guy called Jeffrey Kurland, denies it completely. He says the bra was made in America, and he actually bought it from a little boutique in LA. You know, it's stories like that undermine what she's built.
Now, behind me here are the premises of Michael and Michelle's first business, the grandly named MGM International. What wasn't so grand was the area, which, especially around 1996 when they formed it, was quite rough to say the least. Michelle apparently got mugged going into her business one day in her car. Somebody jumped her, and the surrounding area was usually full of boarded up businesses and trees growing out of gutters. I once noted this in an article about Michelle, and she phoned my editor in absolute fury, and using very unladylike language said to him, our offices, which were nearby at the time, were a total shithole too. But it was inside here where Michelle would plot what celebrity she could get for her next brand launch. And this is also where she made one of her first major mistakes.
She was told by Debenhams apparently that she needed a famous face. They would buy in her brand, but she would need someone, you know, of some sort of quality, I guess. You know, twins standing outside Selfridges weren't enough now. We had to go up to the next level. So she couldn't afford anyone sort of quite so big as the stars that she had in the end. But she got on with Rod Stewart, fellow Scot. So Rod asked Penny Lancaster, you know, could you do a favour for my friend? Penny's absolutely stunning, of course, as we all know, really leggy, the perfect Ultimo model. So, you know, she gets Penny on board and boom, the whole thing explodes. It doesn't last too long though. In the pursuit for publicity, Michelle then dumps Penny for Rachel Hunter. For those who don't know Rachel Hunter, she's Rod Stewart's ex. It caused an absolute huge stushy at the time. Rod Stewart ended up calling her a manipulative cow once she dumped his partner. you can understand his anger. He'd done her a favour. She really was. She wasn't, a massive manufacturer at that time. Rod had really stepped up to do a fellow Scot a favour. And in return, Michelle got in Rachel. Huge blow to him emotionally, I'm guessing, and to Penny, it must have been extremely hurtful. But it just showed very early on the lengths that Michelle would go to. In fact, someone I was talking to that she used to work with years ago in the modelling industry described her as having the ambition of Attila the Hun.
Responding to the attack from Rod Stewart, Michelle told me at the time, Rod was very personal. It destroyed me, which is what he aimed to do. Rachel's a lovely person and a working mum like me, the complete opposite from, well, I've said enough. Put it this way, things got rocky towards the end with me and Penny. If I wrote a book about just half the things that went on, it would be a bestseller, but I'm very confidential. But of course, finding a positive spin on things as usual, she went on to add, Rod has only ever attacked 3 people publicly, Elton John, Sting, and the lassie from Glasgow's East End, me. But soon, Michelle wouldn't need any celebrities at all. Following massive weight loss, where she shed several stone, and her mumsy image, she became the brand. She was the one modelling the next Ultimo ranges. And then she also had another product to sell.
Michelle Mone was behind a drug called Trim Secrets, which has since been pulled off the market. And it was actually called out as one of the worst diets by the British Dietetic Association, which is my trade union. One of the claims was that it boosts metabolism. Another was that it's an appetite suppressant. But what we know is that drugs like these, which claim to boost metabolism, can actually be really dangerous. They have been known to cause the body to overheat. They can cause problems with organs. So definitely avoid anything that says lose 7 pounds in a week. A lot of the side effects might be laxative in nature. So actually you're just putting money literally down the toilet.
With Michelle now seeing herself as a brand in her own right, this led to the first cracks in our marriage. As Michelle herself said at the time, my husband said, "You're not doing that photo shoot in your underwear," which made me want to do it. But when the end of their relationship came, it was explosive. In 2011, Michelle claimed she had caught her husband cheating with a senior Ultimo employee, Samantha Bunn, after employing the services of a private detective. In retaliation, the future Lady Mone vandalised Michael's £100,000 Porsche, put laxatives in his coffee and cut up his clothes. She then left him. She told The Sun at the time, "I spent the day crying. I'd been married 19 years and had just turned 40. It was horrible, but I got through it and I'm grateful to Michael now. It gave me the incentive to prove that I could go it alone." And Michelle certainly did enjoy going it alone, embarking on a string of love affairs. In 2013, she was linked with the Aussie cricket legend Shane Warne. She was also pictured with X Factor singer Shane Ward, but later said, "We were pictured together at my book launch. He's a great guy, but I don't want a toy boy. I would feel uncomfortable." A more permanent relationship came the following year when she hooked up with Sandy Lane golf pro Stefan Sorokel. Michelle was having fun, flaunting her enviable lifestyle across social media and having a laugh along the way too. Like the time she went to Vietnam and picked up what she thought was a 6-year-old boy to pose for a snap, only to discover he was actually a 46-year-old man with dwarfism. And in 2023, she threatened Scottish newspaper The National with legal action. That's after it reported on her claims that the renowned German physicist, Albert Einstein no less, had lived in her house. This was during a bizarre Hello magazine video shoot where she showed a camera crew around her newly renovated Glasgow townhouse.
It's a Victorian townhouse, and Einstein lived here as well.
However, the men she was dating all paled into insignificance when she fell head over heels for Glasgow-born billionaire Doug Barrowman in 2016 after meeting at a shareholders meeting. At the time, the divorced dad of 4 had 2 luxury yachts called Turquoise and Minx, along with 6 homes, 15 cars including 2 Ferraris, 7 Range Rovers and a Bentley, a private jet, and an art collection including a priceless Picasso. His brash style is said to have appealed to Michelle, who is no shrinking violet herself. Asked in a Channel 4 documentary why he bought 2 yachts, he said, "I suppose the flippin' answer is because I can." But it was one of these yachts that was at the centre of another scandal facing Michelle. In 2022, she paid out a reported £50,000 to finance consultant Richard Linton-Jones after she was accused of calling him a waste of a man's white skin during a WhatsApp row following a fatal accident on board. Linton-Jones, who is of Indian heritage, sued her for libel following the death of a deckhand in 2019 while he and Mone were staying on the French Riviera. Mone and Barrowman were staying on the 88-foot Minx with friends and family while Mr. Linton-Jones was a guest on another super yacht. The 2 groups of passengers had sailed to an island for lunch, hopping on and off each other's boats. But on the journey home, the other yacht accidentally ploughed into Mr. Barrowman's boat, killing 27-year-old Jake Feldware. Mone was unhappy that Linton-Jones had not shown enough respect for the death of the worker. While the criminal investigation into the allegedly racial aggravated text was dropped, Mone settled the civil claim with Linton-Jones out of court. The couple married in 2018 and went on to launch numerous business ventures. This included their own cryptocurrency, where Michelle, as modest as ever, declared herself as one of the biggest experts in cryptocurrency and blockchain. The pair planned to raise $80 million for their joint venture, but just a few months later the project had flopped and all investors had been refunded, according to the Sunday Times. Then in 2021 they launched a hybrid office complex called Neospace in Aberdeen. This was built on the back of the belief that the workplace will never be the same again after COVID, as she put it. There's no doubt the couple viewed COVID as a business opportunity. In 2020, when the world came to a shuddering halt, Mone and Barrowman leapt into action when the UK government appealed for help producing and manufacturing personal protective equipment known as PPE.
What I'd say is that it is a constant effort to get the PPE to the front line, a huge logistical effort. We acknowledge the challenges, of course we do, we face them every day, and we are doing everything in our power to get that PPE to the front line. If you've got production facilities and you can meet our published technical specifications, we want to hear from you so that we can make this kit here in Britain that'll keep people safe.
Just weeks later, the government awarded PPE MedPro 2 contracts to supply PPE. The first, for £80.85 million, was to supply 210 million face masks. The second, for £122 million, was to supply 25 million sterile surgical gowns. In October that year, the government published the PPE MedPro contracts. Mone and Barrowman emphatically denied they were involved. A lawyer for the couple said any suggestion of an association between Mone and PPE MedPro would be inaccurate, misleading and defamatory. But like a poorly stitched gown, their story soon started to come apart at the seams. The National Crime Agency executed search warrants at Mone and Barrowman's homes in London and the Isle of Man and at PPE MedPro's offices. The government then announced it was suing PPE MedPro for the full £122 million it had paid for the rejected gowns plus costs. PPE MedPro said it would be rigorously defending the claim. Once a prolific social media user who often posted pictures of the celebrities she'd met at exotic hotspots or posing with her yacht, the Lady Mone, Michelle maintained a low profile. But in December 2022, she broke the silence to announce she was taking a leave of absence from the House of Lords with immediate effect in order to clear her name of the allegations that had been unjustly levelled against her. But even that didn't deflect from the scandal that was to engulf the last Tory government, with Rishi Sunak grilled about Michelle Mone at Prime Minister's questions.
How did his colleague, Baroness Mone, end up with nearly £30 million of taxpayers' money in her bank account?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me say, like everyone else, I was absolutely shocked to read about the allegation. It's absolutely right. It's absolutely right that she is no longer attending the House of Lords, and therefore no longer has the Conservative whip.
Do you take any responsibility for her exploiting government connections because you gave her the platform to?
Well, obviously, Michelle Mone is responsible for what she does. Yes, I did nominate her for a peerage because at the time, from what I could see, she was a successful businesswoman, an entrepreneur, a proud Scot, a proud Brit, and a proud Conservative.
The PPE scandal also brought an end to Michelle's long-term relationship with celebrity bestie Carol Vorderman. The pair had met at a charity event in London in 2010 and enjoyed regular boozy nights out in the years afterwards. There were trips to the races and fancy restaurants that went on until the former mass whiz from Countdown took exception to the vast sums her pal had made from the controversial PPE government contracts. The first sign that things had gone wrong between them was in December 2022, when the truth about the scandal began to come out. Carol tweeted, well, what's afoot here? Another tweet she wrote, Michelle Mone lobbied for PPE MedPro, but she was enriched by its profits, and now the gloves are off. Carol even urged her famously litigious pal to take her to court during an appearance on ITV's This Morning. Carol said, I dropped her like a stone when I realised what kind of person she was. Then looking directly at the camera, she added, sue me, Michelle. But Michelle had a long history of threatening to sue news organisations and newspapers, including this one, if we dared to write anything she disagreed with.
There are other lawyers that she worked with, and she was instructing the lawyers to contact the media and say, you know, if you repeat this again, I'll be suing you. It's all totally untrue. And the lawyer was being told by her, you know, this is 100%. And then the lawyers discovered later they were being put in the terrible position of going to newspapers. Not just the lawyer you've spoken to, but other lawyers in Glasgow were put in a terrible position of then having to say to newspapers, listen, I'm really sorry. I mean, the rule I always tell people, whether it's clients or lawyers, if you're dealing with the media, never lie to the media. It's so simple. You might say, I'm sorry I can't comment on that. I'm sorry I can't talk to you. But don't tell a lie, because the lie will always find you out.
And at the end of 2023, after 3 years of denials, Mone and Barrowman finally acknowledged that they were involved with PPE MedPro, and in a bizarre turn of events, uploaded to YouTube an interview with investigative journalist Mark William Thomas, which was paid for by PPE MedPro, where the couple denied any wrongdoing as they face allegations of fraud and bribery in the NCA investigation.
I made an error in what I said to the press. I regret not saying to the press straight away, yes, I am involved. Yeah. And the government knew I was involved, and the emergency team, cabinet team knew I was involved. The government, DHSC knew that I was involved, the NHS, all of them knew I was involved. The legal team advised myself and my husband not to comment and not to say that of my involvement in PPE MedPro. What I did say to them was, I'm not a shareholder, which was true. I'm not a director, which was true. I am not financially benefiting directly, which is true.
And again, in terms of Michelle, receiving money, this is where it becomes really quite strange, because the government themselves knew that Doug and Michelle were in a relationship. They were due to get married at that stage. So therefore, naturally, any money that Doug earned was going to be money that indirectly went to his wife-to-be. So when there's a suggestion, well, hang on a minute, she benefited. Well, of course she's going to benefit. Any contracts that Doug has, and it was Doug's contract, Michelle Mone, by the very nature of being partner stroke wife, is going to benefit. And the government knew that. And so if the government had a problem of their relationship, they should never have awarded the contract.
But I think it's the transparency of it as well, denying it to the media countless times and saying, there is no involvement, when quite clearly there was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was her biggest problem, wasn't it? Was actually when I did the interview with them for the very first time, she accepted that she'd lied to the media. Now, she had been given advice by media specialists about what to say, and it was really a play on words. I think one of the things that very often people who are thrown into the spotlight fail to acknowledge is that you just need to be honest. You just need to be entirely straight. If you try and play with words, you try and reduce it in some way, the likelihood is it will come back and bite you. What they needed to do was to simply say, well, yes, of course, I'm going to indirectly benefit by the very nature of my husband earning the money. They've both been hugely affected. I didn't know them prior to this, so I can only go on the nature of them, how they are in my dealings with them. Michelle is an utterly broken woman. Michelle herself, she has some neurodivergent issues, and she's really, really struggled with this. Doug is a much more difficult, much different individual. He's very confident, he's very strong, and actually he has been the spine really of the relationship. He's kept it going under all kinds of pressure, the force and the pressure that the government have tried to apply to him in seizing assets, in freezing assets, but it has had a huge impact on them. And there's no doubt when I started to deal with both of them that the pressures that they were under did concern me to the degree that at one stage I said to both of them, I don't know if a program is right for you because I think you are both really struggling. But they so wanted to get their story, their side out, that they stayed with it. And I think the program, pointed out some really important elements. And I think it was really important that the public hear. The public will ultimately believe what they want to believe, and they'll make up their own mind.
Mone's lawyer at the time, Jonathan Code, has since apologised for accidentally misleading the media and strongly denies that he had advised her at the time to keep quiet about PPE MedPro.
It is incumbent on me to say, I did not advise her that she should keep her involvement with PPE MedPro secret. And so the suggestion that she did so by taking the advice of her lawyers, i.e. as far as the public concern is me, that just is not true. So to have Baroness Mone, against whom I bear no ill will, who I've got no desire for vengeance or anything else like that. When she goes on, as you remember, there were two documentaries. There was her own commissioned documentary, and then she went before Laura Kuenssberg to make allegations against me, which were effectively of serious impropriety on my part, was something which was potentially very damaging for me. I haven't been in contact with her, but she has been in contact with me via her new lawyers. And believe it or not, I got an angry letter from them. You may remember that I publicly and unequivocally apologised both to the BBC and to The Guardian, with whom I have excellent relationships, which I really treasure, for unintentionally misleading them. You'll recall I gave them an unqualified apology, but I also explained, as was relevant and was true, that all that I said was based on the instructions that I received. Well, guess what? I got a shirty letter from her current lawyers complaining that I had made these apologies in effect, that I'd disclosed confidential information in so doing, which I don't think that I did. But firstly, of course, so far as the confidential information about how I interacted with her, well, she's been on primetime BBC television talking about that very thing. So it didn't seem to me that I was breaching confidential information when she talked about it in the first place. Anyway, you can imagine that letter got a fairly dusty response.
Leaked documents to The Guardian produced by HSBC Bank showed that Barrowman was paid at least £65 million from PPE MedPro's profits. The documents also indicated that Barrowman then transferred £29 million to an offshore trust, of which Mone and her 3 adult children were the beneficiaries. But Michelle saw nothing wrong with that.
What my husband decides to do after the event and who benefits from that is at his discretion. I am his wife and I may indirectly benefit, but that's just like all other families around that are married. That's just it. That is not my money. I don't have that money. It's not my money.
But her self-funded video interview was seen as nothing more than a PR exercise. Then during a follow-up interview with the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg, Mone admitted that she had lied to the press when she repeatedly denied involvement in the company via her lawyers.
It was one of the worst PR strategies I have ever seen in my life. They shot themselves in the foot. And it was a laughing stock, and all this romping around the garden with the two wee dogs and so on. It was pathetic, and of course it was a gift to the BBC, who then I think interviewed her the next Sunday, Laura Kuenssberg, and Laura absolutely skewered her. Masterful interview. Just brought her along, and you just need to look at Laura's face, who was clearly thinking, this is just nuts. And then she stuck the knife in, and boom, that was it.
Michelle Mone said she had lied to protect her family from press attention and now regretted it, but said that lying to the media was not a crime. Even though she'd finally owned up, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who was the leader of the opposition at the time, felt that she shouldn't have been in the House of Lords.
I don't think she should be in the Lords. I think the government should be held to account for this. Who started the conversations with her in the first place is a question that the government now needs to answer. But I do think many people would say, in addition to this case, there's £7 billion worth of fraud in COVID. That's completely unacceptable when everybody watching this knows that their public services have been run down to the ground, and the NHS desperately needs more money.
At the start of 2024, assets controlled by Mone and her husband were frozen under a court order obtained by the Crown Prosecution Service. It was reported that restrictions had been placed on over £75 million worth of assets, including a townhouse in Belgravia, properties in Glasgow, and an estate in the Isle of Man, and numerous bank accounts. The National Crime Agency has said it's not scared of lawyers acting for the pair and is progressing an investigation as fast as we can. They could face criminal charges, or they could be cleared for any wrongdoing if all the charges are dropped. But Mone's former PR advisor, Jack Irvine, has this advice. If she came back to you, and I know you'd probably say no, but if she came back to you and you were at a loose end, what would your advice be to her now?
If she came back to me, if she offered me £5 million to look after her, I wouldn't. Nobody can handle that woman. But if I did give her advice, if I was feeling very Christian, I would say move far, far, far away from Britain and never come back.